Hey, this is Dan, aka Function Star, here with a new TouchDesigner component release. This one is based on an effect found in the popular mobile apps called a Mirror Lab or Glitch Lab. There they call it Topology 3D. Here I've named it Layer Separation or Layer Sep. And what it essentially does is it takes texture input and separates that texture into different threshold bands onto different geometry layers. This is a geocomp, so you will need a render setup around it. And yeah, the download is in the description below. It's for free, but of course you can name your own price or donate. There's also PDF documentation included, so you can skip all this video and jump right into creating with it. I think it's really fun. There's lots of use cases for it. But one important thing is that it utilizes texture instancing or instance texturing. I always mix them up. Anyway, Mac users will not be able to have fun with this, unfortunately. Yeah, I will jump into parameters and tips and tricks and all that in the rest of the video, so yeah, keep tuned if you want. Before we get further into it, I wanna plug my Instagram, function.str, and there under my guides you will find this here, a collection of posts I've made in the past using this technique, also in tandem with my complex function toolkit. They are a very good match, and yeah, for example, this post has been picked up by the TouchDesigner Instagram page as well. It works very well with video input, not only geometric textures or whatever. So yeah, I put some notes here and there, and yeah, if you end up using it anywhere in your production, I will be very curious to see, so feel free to tag me. Yeah, let's get into the parameters. Once you've downloaded this component, you should place it in your sidebar palette and drag it in. As I mentioned, it's a geometry comp, so you will need a render setup around it, which I will quickly do now. Put down a camera, an ambient light, and make the background black, and just show this out. So by default it ships with a nice noise texture. We can of course replace it with whatever we want on the first top input, so let's just do that. Let's increase the resolution. So by default the first and the second top inputs are wired internally to be the same, but they can also differ, in which case the first top input will be used as the color texture and the second input will be used as the depth texture, so to speak. So if I change this to circular, the color will be kept as the first one. If we just replace it with the default noise, you can see what really happens here. And the first input in the line is the sub input, which is by default a grid, which also adapts to the aspect ratio of your texture, but this can be anything you want. So let's do sphere, and yeah, there we go. Let's take a look at all the other parameters now. So let's go back to our default setting, like so. Okay. You can change the number of layers. This is maybe a bit too much, but you can do that. You can offset the layers, so the order of the layers can be offset. The order can also be shuffled. If it's non-zero, it's a random seed. You can solo on one single layer and change which one you solo with the offset. You can invert the order of the layers. We can enable depth calculation, which will make it look a bit ugly, but we can fix it later with some settings. And you can also enable this mix below slider. So if you take a look at it from another perspective, by default, the subsequent layers are subtracted from the ones above. And with this mix below, we can add them back. There's this anti-alias switch, which makes the lines look a bit better, but also if you change the aliasing in your render setup, it also helps a lot, I think. Yeah, like 16 high looks much better already. But we can also make it look nicer with some softening later on. Let's pull these back. Next up is the threshold tab. You can change the mode of the threshold comparison, so it's the same mode you have in the threshold top, even though here deep inside is a GLSL implementation of the threshold top. So you can change the mode, but there's a bug. The menu doesn't update unless you reload the parameter window. I have no idea why this happens, and it's just there. We can change the softening of the threshold also, and of course the threshold itself. Why we have these 4 parameters for these is because basically there's, if you take a look inside, there's curves defined for the whole geometry, and if we change the parameters here, let's see, change the threshold power, you can see it changes this curve, and the effect of that is that you can have very precise control over your layers. Yeah, like soften if you change the amplitude of the softening, you can see maybe that the layers in the back don't have any softening and the layers in the front have more. You can also invert it. So yeah, the ones in the front now have no alpha or less alpha than the ones in the back. Next up, we can change the alpha threshold, and we can turn on multiplying color by alpha as well. Okay, this is about the threshold. Next up is the transform tab. We have 3 transform parameters or transform curves defined. One is the z-axis transform. You can play with it quite a lot. Also the scale of each layer and rotation of each layer If we increase here the number of layers, it looks real cool. But because this is a geometry comp, you have all the bells and whistles of a geometry comp, so you can rotate the whole thing or transform the whole thing also with these parameters. And you can also play a lot more around with instancing. Just beware that these transform curves are being used by the instancing parameters here, but you can replace them with your own. These are just for basic use case. Next up is the slots. What I call slot in this context is a texture pegged into this geometry comp. But if for whatever reason we wanted more textures and manipulate them together, we can add more slots. So if I click on this add slot, we get 2 new inputs here. I can connect a ramp here maybe. Turn on depth calculation and change the alpha threshold so we can see behind. You can define how much each slot is offset by the subsequent one. So if I add maybe one more slot here with this noise, we can see that they are each offset by -5. We can also offset the scale of each and the rotation of each. This obviously makes most sense, I guess, if you have some perspective or whatever. You can also turn on this TouchDesigner toggle, which then would make this irrelevant, because they will always be done tied together. By default, the curves, these transform curves, are independent for each slot. So if I rotate, then it rotates each slot by the same curve. But if I turn on these span parameters, then the rotation curve will span through all these slots. Maybe easiest is if I show the curve. So here we have the rotation curve. If I turn this off, it will repeat for each slot. If it's on, then it spans through through all the slot layers. And you can also do this with the softening or the scale or whatever. But you can go back to the default state with this reset button. To be honest, I don't really use this feature, but maybe you want to, so it's there. Yeah, these were the parameters, I guess. Let's maybe look at some examples, some use cases, some tips and tricks next. Let's do something from scratch. Let's start with ramped up. Increase the resolution. Oops, yeah. And I don't know, let's use my previous release, component release, the complex function.star. Let's drag the complex OP and connect this in here. Let's find some camera angle that works. Let's turn on the depth calculation, anti-aliasing on, Let's give it some softness and alpha threshold so that it's smoother, but also increase the anti-aliasing. Now it looks very nice. And all we have to do is, yeah, make this move. Maybe mirror, this looks better here, yeah. Make this move, changing the phase. Yep. There we go, it's just so easy. What I found is that, yeah, it works really well with my previous release, as you can see from my Instagram posts. And also that basically all kind of texture manipulation just adds a new flavor to this. So if let's see if I add a limit top, which is one of my favorites, and quantize the position, you can easily go from a smooth texture to something like a lo-fi texture. The transition is very smooth, that's why I really like this. Let's now also go with something else than the grid. Let's use again a sphere, and we don't want any translation between the layers, rather we want to scale probably and move this back. Okay, what else should we do? Maybe from a horizontal, let's go with a circular ramp here, and with some other texture. We can also pop down a texture sub here so that we have better control over our texture, but this already looks pretty cool. And yeah, I don't know, this is cool. Yeah, I think I have a post like this. And yeah, I don't know really what to show. Maybe I will show the patch that was reposted by the TouchDesigner Instagram page, because a lot of people were interested in that, so yeah, let's go with that. Right, so there's actually not much into it. I downloaded this area footage from Pexels and ran it through the complex math toolkit with this complex sign making the magic. And I guess this is another version of the component, but I'm changing the threshold power in this case, and it has some softening going on as well. And basically that's it. Done and done. Let's also have a quick look at this intro example. So the color input is basically just the video input, non-affected, and only the depth input is then manipulated with a blur so that it's less grainy. As you can see, it can get grainy otherwise. And then a circular ramp is composited on top, so that's why you have this pulsating effect. And yeah, then we switched between this and like a noisy thingy. So the color output is just a noise, but then we composite in different shapes. Here this square tunnel for example, is added onto the noise, and then the switch at one point just changes to a simple circular ramp. So you have this cool transition between some noisy texture, and in between you have something that's not noisy at all. So yeah, play around a lot with compositing different textures together and switching between them. That's a recommendation I can give you. I don't know why I zoomed out. I'm also gonna show this patch because it very easily demonstrates how you can achieve different looks and how you can transition between them with simple operations. And yeah, the layer separation will just make everything happen by itself, kind of. So we start with a ramp with a low period, a circular ramp, and we go into a limit top. Let me first just disable this. We go into limit top, so we can switch between this circular and the square look again. Very smooth, very nice. With the level top we can change the distribution of the layers, of the textures on the layers. Also very simple operation. Then we split into two paths, one for the color look and one for the depth, so to speak, depth. It's not the best name, I think. Anyhow, if we don't have this blur here, you will see that we get more discrete layers, not much happening between the layers, but with introducing some blur, you can feel those layers in between, as you can see. And we can also composite in some noise, so we do a difference composite, and we can break these up a bit, which is again pretty cool. And with the color, we can introduce an edge effect. So yeah, so that the squares are not filled anymore. As I said, very simple operations, very distinct looks. I just love it. You can play with it endlessly, kind of. So yeah, you will always get this fake 3D, which I really like. It's not like a height map, but it's still 3D. Yeah, this will be in the downloads. So starting with the easy stuff, here we have the default grid with the dynamic aspect ratio based on the size of the input texture, the color input. Here you can see that by default the depth and the color textures are the same, and by default it uses a constant matte, but you can of course replace it with a Phong matte if you want. Inside here you will find a lot of random scripts having to do with handling the parameters and states of the parameters. On the right hand side you will find the patterns, so the curves for all the parameters. You can have a look inside what happens. Here we'll not go into too much detail. This replicator is responsible for handling the slots. By default we only have one slot. And then inside here is the actual magic, I guess. So we always fit the depth input to the color input. That's something to keep in mind, for them to be the same size. Here we collect all the layers for our texture instancing, and also create a pattern for the texture indexes, or indices rather. And here is the actual magic, the layer separation, also done with replicators. So right now we have 10 layers, and in each of these bases you will find the GLSL code that implements the threshold top, basically the threshold operation with the different modes and some compositing that is needed to subtract the threshold, the new threshold band from the incoming texture, so that if we add all these textures here together, okay, not like this, but with a composite. Okay, I thought this would work, but anyhow, yeah. So if we add all these back together, we are met with our original texture, which is really cool because there's no information loss or information added or anything like that. Yeah, let's have a look at the GLSL implementation, I guess. But before that, I wanna just give some explanation. First, I started with the top only implementation. Let's see if I can find it. Okay, I found it. So let's have a look inside. It started off pretty simple. Also only having one texture as opposed to having a color and a threshold separately. So we have here the input. We have a different threshold value for all the layers. And yeah, basically that's about the threshold. We just do the threshold. We multiply the original texture with this threshold mask, which will be our leftover, which we will chain forward to the next layer. And to get the actual layer, we subtract from the original, we subtract this masked threshold layer. And you can see it here. These are going to be our layers. The leftovers are always passed on to the next layer. And again, the same with the higher threshold is going to be performed. So this is when the threshold and the color and the depth textures are the same. And I'm gonna find the one where I implemented also in tops, having them separated. So there we go. Now we have two inputs for all the bases. One for the color, one for the depth. So I call them here image and mask. And inside we have a pretty similar structure. With two paths. So one is for the mask only, very similar as before. Do the threshold multiply it with the original, and this will be our mask passed forward to the next layer. So this will be then connected back here, basically. And we have a path for the image. Also similar, we multiply the image with this threshold mask, and this then will be our leftover color texture, image texture that's going to be passed together. So it should actually be in kind of this order. And then we have the output image, which is going to be our actual layer, which is then this leftover subtracted from the original texture. This will be our current layer. So then they are chained together, and we get the layers. So how it looks in GLSL. So pretty soon I realized that doing everything in tops would be pretty wasteful, because if you have 50, 100, however many layers, you need to replicate around 10 or how many tops for each of them, and they're gonna contain 3 or 4 composite operations, which can be pretty heavy, especially if you have so many of them replicated. So that's why I went with the GLSL approach. The threshold you could still probably do outside. It wouldn't make much difference. But I found some, I cut together some implementation of a threshold GLSL code and used that. And then here we have the same kind of composites going on. So we have the threshold calculation and the mask. We multiply the mask input with this new threshold mask. Then we have our leftover mask that we chain forward. Then again the color output, which will be kind of our leftover. So the threshold mask multiplied with the original input. Sorry, this is not our leftover, this is our actual layer. And then we have the output, which is the color, and subtracting the threshold masked color from that, and that's our leftover. Is it? Yes. Yeah, and also here's the aliasing. When you click on the aliasing on, this then turns on or off for each layer here. Yeah, don't know how deep I should go into it. Most of it is in just connecting the replicators in a correct way and handling some edge cases when there's only one of them, or yeah. For example, here at the end, there's an edge case where you want to have your layer is gonna be normally the third output. So the mask multiplied with the color. But for the last layer, you want to have the leftover also as your layer, which makes sense to use up the leftover pixels for the last layer. That's one trick, I guess, that I had to think of a bit. Honestly, there's not so much that I want to go into the detail on. My goal with this series is that you just use my tools. I'm not the best teacher, I believe, so there's not much I can give you on the details. Sometimes even I don't understand what I'm doing. It's just lots of trial and error and having fun with it, and lots of intuition. But yeah, I want to thank the developers of Mirror Lab or Glitch Lab or Chroma Lab. I think also they have for the inspiration for this tool. I think it's very, very cool. It's a very neat idea. And yeah, thank you for all my supporters, for all the donations, downloads, messages, whatever. It's really nice to see my tools being used from all over the world, and it really drives me forward. So expect some more stuff in the future. Yeah, thanks for sticking around until the outro, and see you around.